Welcome to another VeVe Digital Collectibles Breakdown video. I'm Corey with VeVe, and today is one for the history books for more reasons than one. First and foremost, our VeVe stamp collectors and philatelists can rejoice because the New Zealand Post 1898 Pictorial Series 1 establishes our newest relationship in the wider stamp world. And here to talk about it with us today is Ant Harris from the New Zealand Post. Ant, thank you so much for coming today to talk to us. Can you briefly introduce yourself to our collectors?
Sure. My name's Antony Harris. Everyone calls me Ant. I'm the head of Stamps Collectibles for New Zealand Post. And look, we deliver a commemorative stamp or coin program, and we also deliver other collectible products. And we're obsessed with everything that we do is of high quality and strongly reflects New Zealand's culture, heritage, history, and its people. And I've got an amazing, awesome team that I work with that are very passionate about what we do. Yeah, we're delighted that we can do it with VeVe, New Zealand company, and that we're second on the platform behind the United States, because a lot of countries have already gone this way or are wanting to, and we didn't want to be kind of left behind.
Before we get into the rich history and importance of these stamps with Ant, let's quickly go over the drop details for this upcoming NZ Post 1898 Pictorial Series. Scheduled to release on June 10th at 8 a.m. Pacific Time, the NZ Post 1898 Pictorial Series 1 will boast 7 stamps in blind box with a price of 6 gems. This is a waitlist drop, which means 30 minutes before the release time, collectors will be able to join the waitlist for a chance to secure a purchase. Randomly assigned collectors will have 15 minutes to secure their purchases. After this point, still available collectibles will become publicly available for purchase. Alright, Ant, let's get right into the history and the story behind these stamps because they really came out during an interesting time in New Zealand history. These stamps originally were produced 125 years ago, and New Zealand was a very different place 125 years ago. Can you sort of ground us in the history just briefly of what was happening, what led to these stamps coming into existence?
Well, look, so the stamps were one of the earliest pictorial definitive issues. At that stage, most countries would not want to depart from having a portrait of a monarch or a president on a stamp. There are 13 stamps in total, but there ended up being 14 because there was a printing error on one of them. So there's 2 versions of one of the stamps. Anyway, in 1898, look, New Zealand wasn't well known globally at that time. So there were incredible tourism and promotional opportunities. New Zealand being so beautiful, lakes, rivers, forests, and natural wonders. At that time, we had the 8th wonder of the world, which was the pink and white terraces. There was a desire to encourage migration, to encourage tourism and promote the country globally. So the decision to issue pictorial stamps must be seen in that context.
And like you mentioned, this arguably was one of the first instances of stamps like these being released as part of a promotional event to promote tourism and citizenship. Prior pictorials focused on historic events or important things, but this really was just a super unique stamp series, wasn't it?
Yeah, so some have argued that that it was actually the first stamp release in the world to focus on promoting a country's natural beauty or a tourism stamp or something like that. Because the other few pictorials that had been released were, pictorials, pictures of people or something going on or whatever. This was really focused on amazing kind of wonders and scenery in New Zealand. So it was unique from that perspective.
And just for people who are maybe newer to collecting and newer to stamps, and can you give us a brief definition of what a pictorial stamp is? And this is really interesting because this 1898 series kind of helped define the term.
In New Zealand, the 40 years before all the stamps had been of Queen Victoria, there'd been requests from the public to focus on pictures of New Zealand's natural beauty. The government did a design competition, and the definition or the brief that they gave for what they wanted was to include a notable New Zealand scenery in the design for a stamp issue symbolic of the land. So that's probably a good definition of what a pictorial stamp is in this context.
Can you go a little deeper into the design aspect of the release of these stamps? And while you're doing that, I'll show some of the scans and images that you provided us.
They got 2,400 entries, which they weren't expecting. The judging panel was appointed. All the designs were exhibited around the country so people could go and see them, all 2,400. So massive exhibition. You could pay to go and see it, and all the money from the fees went to charity. And it was felt that the quality was so great that they were going to make enough money that they could upgrade the printing to recess printing, which was quite expensive in those days.
And to really highlight the value and collectability and importance of this series to New Zealand and the stamp world overall, I was hoping we could just take a minute to talk about the Centenary. You had sent me some scans, and I believe it's the book to your left, my right, that you have up on the shelf. And
very good.
Was that the more modern reprint?
All the pictorials were reprinted 100 years after they were first released, with updated denominations like 40 cents, 80 cents, etc. But they've done a really good job, and you've got sheets of the new stamps in that book, but they've done a really good job of researching the history of the initial 1898 pictorials, and a lot of the information I've spoken about ultimately is from that.
All right, Ant, now we're going to go over each and every one of the stamps that are releasing the Series 1, and lucky for me, you are here to provide some of that historical context. Let's get right into these. First, we have the half-pence Mount Cook stamp, coming in as a common and minting 2,898 editions. Ant, can you give us some history for this one?
So yeah, like the first one, which is kind of the half-pence stamp featuring Mount Cook. So that's named after Captain Cook, well, the mountain is, and that's New Zealand's highest mountain, at about 3,750 meters. Now, geologists don't really know why it's so high, because all the neighboring mountains are about 300 meters lower, but it's probably because of some rapid uplift caused by an earthquake. And on the stamp is also 2 alpine flowers, giant buttercup or Mount Cook lily and the mountain daisy, and it's also known as the cloud piercer.
Next, we have the 1 penny Lake Taupo stamp, also coming in as a common and minting 2,898 editions. But there's nothing really common about this stamp, right, Ant?
Yeah, now this is a really cool stamp. So 1 penny stamp featuring Lake Taupo with Mount Ruapehu in the background and a cabbage tree on the left. So the cabbage tree was named the cabbage tree because early European settlers used to eat it in place of cabbage. Now, Lake Taupo is the largest lake in New Zealand, covering about 600 square kilometres. Now, what's really cool about this stamp is that it was done with 2 colours. So the first 2-colour stamp for New Zealand, so done with 2 plates. Now, what's really interesting history-wise, so this was 1898 pictorial, but in 1900 it was reproduced as a 4-pence stamp. And New Zealand, there was an error in that, presumably just on 1 sheet, because it's done with 2 plates, where the outside of the stamp was printed the right way up, but the Lake Taupo was printed the wrong way up. There's only 1 stamp in existence which New Zealand Post actually owns that's been cancelled. Presumably there was a whole sheet produced, but there's only 1 known, and that's actually New Zealand's rarest stamp in existence.
Our first uncommon in the series is the 2-pence Pembroke Peak stamp, and it is minting 1,898 editions. What can you tell us about this one?
Yeah, the 2-pence stamp features Pembroke Peak in Milford Sound. So Milford Sound is absolutely beautiful, and it's along the southern extremities of the west coast of the South Island, and there's a series of sounds or fjords there of quite remarkable beauty. So Pembroke Peak is situated in Milford Sound, and it rises to a height of about 2,100 meters. The sounds themselves, or the fjords, are one of the oldest on the Earth's surface, and it's one of New Zealand's most popular tourist destinations. What's interesting about this stamp release is that there's 2 stamps on the Milford Sounds, and there's 2 stamps on the white and pink terraces. So it's nice to have those in the same drop.
Next, we have the Milford Sound stamp. It's classified as an uncommon and is minting 1,898 editions. What's the story with this one, Ant?
This is specifically on the Milford Sounds, this stamp, and it's 2 shillings. So as I said, it's New Zealand's most famous tourist destination. It's named after Milford Haven in Wales. Now, on the right of the stamp is Mitre Peak, which is about 1,700 meters high. And this whole area of the South Island has some of the most majestic and unspoiled scenery in the world. What's interesting about Mitre Peak is that it's one of the largest mountains rearing up from the sea on the planet, coming straight out of the sea. So absolutely beautiful.
The first and only rare of the series is the 4-pence White Terraces stamp, which is minting 1,498 editions.
The White Terraces, 4 pence. So these terraces were produced by geothermically heated water, which left thick white layers of limestone. The white and pink terraces were considered the eighth wonder of the natural world, but they were completely destroyed by a volcanic eruption of Mount Tarawera in 1886. So gone. The only record of them existing is people's photos and drawings from that time. And actually that eruption claimed about 150 lives and is one of the most destructive kind of volcanic eruptions in New Zealand history.
Moving right to the ultra rare, the 9-penny pink Terraces stamp is minting 898 editions.
So the 9-penny stamp features the pink terraces that were destroyed along with the white terraces by the explosive eruption of Mount Tarawera. And again, the only records that exist of these terraces are paintings and photographs that were taken at the time. The pink terraces were smaller and slightly lower than the white terraces, and they were smooth like enamel with a pinkish tinge.
Finally, the 2.5 pence Lake Wakatipu stamp comes in as the series secret rare and is minting 598 editions. This one has the wildest history of them all. Please share it with us, Ant.
This is probably the most exciting stamp in the release, the 2.5 pence stamp that features Lake Wakatipu. Now, what's interesting about this stamp is there were two versions produced. The first version had a spelling error, so then it was replaced by another version with corrected spelling. But both stamps are considered as part of the 1898 Pictorials. Now, the one that's being released in this drop is the second stamp with the correct spelling. About Lake Wakatipu, it's the second largest lake in the South Island and lies at the southern end of the Southern Alps in central Otago. In the stamp, you can see Mount Earnslaw, some New Zealand foliage, flax, cabbage trees, and toi. So again, this is the most famous stamp of the issue. So the original stamp contains a spelling mistake. Wakatipu was spelt with an I instead of an A. Now, this was done, the plates were done in London, and when the proofs were sent to New Zealand, it showed the error. So London was then asked by New Zealand to change the plates and correct the error, but the message didn't get through. So the first shipment of 300,000 of these stamps to New Zealand had the error on it. New Zealand decided to issue the stamp with the error. And of course, collectors went crazy and wanted to buy it all up. So they limited people could only buy one sheet each, and I think that was reduced to half a sheet or even less as time went by. The demand was so high that they requested for more of the errored stamps to be produced, which arguably is a little bit kind of cheeky. And as a result, they reprinted the corrected stamp, but they held off releasing it until all the errors were sold out. So actually the error is now more common than the correct spelling. And once they sold out of all the errors, then they started to release the one with the correct spelling.
What I love about that story is it goes to show that times change, but people don't, because people are collectors specifically are exactly the same way today. You know, if there's an error or there's something wrong with it, everyone buys it, and then no one cares about the corrected one, and then you have an inverse of value over time because there's so many more preserved of that error. It's just wild. 125 years ago.
In theory, it never should have happened because there was obviously a mistake between New Zealand and London. So, and then once they had it, it's like, well, we're not going to throw away 300,000 stamps, so let's just release them. And then there was so much excitement about it. But then the decision to, at that point, completely different decision, which was, oh, this is so popular, let's print some more deliberately. That was perhaps that was an interesting decision, but you know, there ended up being more of the error than the correct spelling.
Before we close out this video, any last words for our collectors on VeVe and about stamps in general that you'd like to share?
What's great about being able to do this is we've got digital artwork that links back to real stamps that have a connection with the New Zealand history of 125 years ago. 1898 Pictorials are a very special stamp release for New Zealand, and it'll be wonderful to see these images being released digitally. And we're delighted to be working with VeVe. We think it's the right choice. But for us, this is about promoting New Zealand, and it's about being able to strongly reflect New Zealand's culture, heritage, history, and its people.
And with that, we've finished another breakdown video. A massive thank you to Ant and New Zealand Post for coming on and sharing some of the unique and rich history behind this stamp release. I'm really looking forward to more conversations with all of you in the future as more stamps released. With that being said, best of luck if you all decide to go for this one. And until the next breakdown video, keep learning, sharing, and collecting what you love. This is Corey with VeVe, signing off.